The desert at dawn is still and cool. The horizon glows pale gold, the air soft with the faint chill of night. And there, rising above the sands, stand the pyramids' immense shapes of stone, their edges sharp against the sky. They cast long shadows that stretch across the desert floor, falling upon the villages where the workers live. To stand here is to feel both awe and weariness, for the pyramids are not simply monuments of kings. They are monuments built from the sweat, hunger, and labor of thousands of ordinary men. Imagine yourself among them. The sun has barely risen, yet already the village stirs. From mud brick houses come the sounds of footsteps, voices, and the faint rattle of clay jars. Men gather in groups, their bodies lean from labor, their skin darkened by sun and sand. They tie belts around their simple linen garments, adjust ropes upon their shoulders, and prepare for another day of endless work. The pyramids rise above them, unfinished, their upper levels a maze of scaffolds, ramps, and stones waiting to be moved. To us, they are symbols of eternity, but to the workers, they are a burden of stone and time. The desert will be their workshop, the sun their overseer, the pyramid their endless task. And so the story begins, not in palaces of gold, but in the dust of the workers' village, where survival is measured not in glory, but in bread, water, and endurance. The men who built the pyramids did not live within the tombs they raised, nor in the palaces of the pharaohs. They lived in villages of mud brick houses clustered close to the construction site. These were not homes of luxury, but simple shelters against the desert heat and the cold nights. Imagine walking through one of these villages. The houses are low, their walls made from baked mud, their roofs flat and covered with reeds. Inside, there is little space, a clay oven for baking bread, mats of woven palm leaves for sleeping, a few clay jars filled with water drawn from the Nile. Families crowd into these small rooms, children pressed close to parents, the air heavy with smoke and dust. The streets are narrow, winding between houses, littered with footprints, broken pottery, and the faint smell of dung from animals kept nearby. Goats and donkeys bray, chickens scratch at the dirt, dogs wander, sniffing for scraps. The noise is constant. Women grinding grain, children calling to each other, the hammer of wood against stone as repairs are made. In the early light, workers gather in the open spaces of the village. They stand in groups, adjusting ropes and sandals, stretching weary muscles before the labor ahead. Some men carry baskets, others long poles, still others ropes coiled across their shoulders. Their faces are weathered, their eyes lined with fatigue, yet they rise each day because there is no choice. Their work is bound to the pharaoh, their survival bound to their labor. Life in the village is communal. Men work together, eat together, sleep side by side in crowded quarters when shifts demand it. Meals are taken in common spaces, bread, onions, beer shared quickly before returning to labor. In the evenings, if strength remains, they speak softly of families, of the Nile, of gods and spirits who might ease their burdens. Disease lingers here. Dust fills the air, spreading coughs. Water, drawn and stored in jars, grows stale, breeding sickness. Wounds from labor fester, bones ache from strain. Yet the community endures, for in unity lies survival. One man's weakness is carried by another's strength. One family's hunger is eased by another's share. To us, the village may seem bare, even bleak, but for the workers, it is home. It is where they wake to the smell of baking bread, where they hear the voices of wives and children, where laughter flickers even in hardship. It is a place not of glory, but of survival. And from these narrow streets, each morning, the men set forth into the desert, toward the pyramid rising slowly stone by stone, toward a labor that will consume their days, their years, and, for many, their lives. To build pyramids of stone, men needed strength, and to find strength, they needed food, not feasts of gold and honey, but the simple fuel of bread, beer, and onions. Day after day, these were the staples that kept thousands of workers alive, their bodies bent in toil beneath the sun. Imagine the morning in the workers' village. The smell of smoke drifts from clay ovens, where women rise before dawn to grind grain. Stones rub against one another, grinding barley and immer wheat into coarse flour. The sound is steady, almost rhythmic, filling the streets like a chant. The flour is mixed with water, pressed into flat rounds, and slid into ovens where the heat bakes them hard and brown. The air is filled with the earthy smell of bread, thick and rough, not soft or sweet, but enough to fill a stomach. With bread comes beer, though not the kind we know today. Egyptian beer was thick, heavy, almost like a porridge, brewed from barley, sweetened with dates or honey when available. It was low in alcohol, but rich in calories. Carried in clay jars, it quenched thirst better than Nile water, which often carried disease. Each man received his measure, and though the taste was sour, the drink gave energy, dulling hunger and easing the heat of the day. There were onions and garlic, pungent and sharp, chewed raw or mixed into stews. They gave strength, so the workers believed, and their flavor broke the monotony of bread. Dates and figs, when rations allowed, added sweetness, a reminder of the Nile's bounty. Lentils, beans, and chickpeas sometimes appeared, boiled into soups, filling and plain. Meat was rare, reserved for festivals, or as reward for great effort. Most days, men ate little beyond bread, beer, and onions. Rations were organized with precision. Scribes, seated with reed pens and clay tablets, recorded each man's share. They counted jars of beer, loaves of bread, baskets of onions. Nothing was left to chance. Order was the key to feeding thousands. Workers lined up, bowls in hand, as rations were handed out by measure. A loaf here, a jar there, the same for each man. For fairness meant peace. Eating was not a time of leisure. It was quick, practical, and necessary. Men squatted in the shade, tearing bread with calloused hands, dipping it into stews if any were prepared, drinking deeply from jars of beer. The food was plain, yet it filled their bellies, steadied their limbs, and gave them strength to return to stone and rope. And still, hunger was constant. The bread was coarse, often gritty with sand from the grinding stones. It wore down teeth, leaving mouths sore, gums bleeding. The beer filled the stomach, but left a sour taste clinging to the tongue. Onions burned the mouth, their sharpness overwhelming after days without change. Variety was rare, and men dreamed of soft figs, of roasted meat, of honey dripping from Combs foods they would not taste for months. Illness spread easily. Spoiled grain carried mold, beer soured in the heat, water jars grew foul. Men grew weak with fevers, their stomachs twisted by bad food. Yet still they ate, for without bread there was no work, and without work there was no life. For us, such meals might seem unbearable, repetition, coarseness, the constant sour and bitter tastes. But for the pyramid workers, this was sustenance, the line between strength and collapse. Each loaf of bread, each jar of beer, was a small victory against the desert, a step toward another day endured. So when the sun climbed high and the desert heat pressed down, the men returned to their labor with bellies half filled, strength renewed by bread and beer, onions and datesta, simple foods that built monuments of eternity. The pyramid itself was nothing more than stone yet. Each block was massive, heavy beyond imagining, weighing as much as 2 or 3 men together. To raise such a monument, thousands of hands were needed, working in unison, day after day, under the relentless Egyptian sun. For the worker, this labor was endless, unchanging, and merciless. Imagine stepping into the desert at dawn. The coolness of night still clings faintly to the sand, but already the work begins. Long lines of men move toward the quarries, ropes coiled across their shoulders, wooden sledges dragged behind them. Ahead lies a vast wall of limestone, pale and sharp in the morning light. From here, the blocks are cut, their edges rough, their weight enormous. The sound of chisels strikes the air, stone against stone, metal against rock, the steady rhythm of tools, chipping, breaking, shaping. Dust rises, coating the skin, filling the lungs. Men wipe sweat from their brows, though the day has barely begun. The blocks, once freed, are dragged onto sledges, tied with ropes, heaved forward by teams of men chanting in unison, their voices low and steady, a rhythm to match the pull of their muscles. Now the sun climbs higher, the desert grows hot, the sand burning beneath bare feet. Cloaks offer no protection. Sweat soaks linen garments until they cling to skin. The sledges grind forward, wooden runners carving lines into the sand. Water is poured before them, dampening the ground, reducing friction, though the relief is small. Every step is strain, every breath heavy. As the blocks near the pyramid site, the true burden begins. Ramps of packed earth and stone rise along the sides of the monument, long slopes reaching upward toward the unfinished heights. Men bend low, straining their backs, their hands raw upon the ropes, their legs trembling beneath the weight. The chant continues. Forward, pull, step, pull. The block inches upward, dragged by dozens of men, its weight threatening to halt them at every moment. Some stumble, their knees giving way. Others push from behind, their shoulders pressed against stone, their faces red with effort. The overseers shout, their voices sharp, their sticks ready to strike those who falter. There is no stopping. The block must reach its place. The pyramid must rise. At the top of the ramp, the block is eased into position. Wooden rollers creak, ropes tighten. Men shout in strained voices as they align it with others. Dust fills the air. The sun beats down. The desert stretches endlessly around them. And when at last the block rests in place, the men sign not in triumph, but in relief. One stone set, thousands more await. The labor continues without end. Day after day, stone after stone, ramp after ramp. Hands grow blistered, calluses split, backs bend, muscles ache, until every movement is pain. The heat never relents, the dust never clears, the weight never lessens. It is labor without reward, except for bread, beer, and the knowledge that the work of their lives will outlast them. At night, when the men lie in their mud brick houses, their bodies ache too deeply for comfort. Sleep comes quickly, but it is not restful. It is the sleep of exhaustion, of muscles too tired to hold tension. And when dawn returns, so too does the labor. For us, such a task would feel impossible. To drag stone after stone, without machines, without rest, beneath the burning sun, would break our bodies within days. But for the pyramid workers, it was life itself. Endless stone, endless effort, endless days in the shadow of a monument they would never see completed. And still they endured. The workers who raised the pyramids did not labor freely. Their strength was directed, measured, and controlled by those above them, supervisors, scribes, and priests, men who rarely touched stone, yet whose voices carried more weight than any block of limestone. Imagine the scene at the base of the pyramid. The sun hangs high, heat pressing upon the men as they pull ropes, their shoulders bent, their bodies trembling. Among them move the overseers, men with shaved heads, linen kilts brighter than the dusty garments of the laborers. In their hands they carry sticks, not for decoration, but for authority. Their eyes scan constantly, watching for weakness, for hesitation, for any man who lets the rope slacken. A single word from an overseer can turn silence into movement. "Pull," he shouts, and the men strain harder. A sharp crack of the stick upon a shoulder reminds them that no pause is allowed, no slack tolerated. These strikes are not meant to cripple, but to warn to. Remind the worker that he is watched, that the pyramid demands more than his comfort. Above the overseers are the scribes, seated in the shade with reed pens and clay tablets. Their work is quieter, but no less powerful. They record each man's ration, each stone delivered, each task completed. Numbers flow across their tablets, cold and unfeeling. A man's life, his food, his standing in the workforce, all reduced to marks upon clay. Without bread, without beer, he cannot endure, and without the scribe's record, no rations will come. And above them still are the priests, their garments white, their heads perfumed with oil, their hands They do not shout, nor do they strike, but their presence carries an authority deeper than any whip. To them, the pyramid is not merely stone, it is a temple, a stairway to eternity, the vessel of a god-king's soul. They remind the workers that their suffering is holy, that their sweat feeds the afterlife of the pharaoh. Their words turn labor into duty, hardship into devotion. The workers believe, or at least they fear enough to obey. The pharaoh is divine, his power absolute. To refuse the overseer is to refuse the pharaoh, to refuse the gods themselves. And so obedience becomes survival, as natural as breath, as necessary as bread. Punishments vary. A man who falters may lose his ration, left hungry at day's end. Another may be beaten, his back striped with red, the sting of the stick lingering for days. Some are cast aside, dismissed to starve in the desert's edge if they fail too often. Death is not common, for even a weak man is stronger than no man at all. But the threat is always present, hovering like the sun above the sands. Yet it is not always cruelty. Some overseers show restraint, understanding that men cannot endure without measure of care. They pace the work, calling for water to be poured upon the sand, offering brief moments of rest in the shade. Even the harshest supervisor knows that broken men cannot move stone, and so discipline and necessity walk side by side, the whip balanced by bread, punishment by rations. For us today, such a life would feel unbearable. Labor ruled not only by hunger and heat, but by the watchful eyes of men who command with words and blows. Yet for the pyramid workers, it was the rhythm of their days. Obedience was survival, and survival was enough. The pyramid rose not only by muscle, but by control. Rope by rope, stone by stone, lash by lash, the overseers and scribes ensured that the great monument did not falter, and in the shadow of their commands, the workers endured, silent, obedient, and unseen. To us, the pyramids are monuments of stone. To the workers who raised them, they were more than that. Each block, each rope pulled, each step upon the ramp was not only labor, it was duty. It was service, not just to a king, but to the gods themselves. In ancient Egypt, the pharaoh was not seen as a man in the way we would understand. He was a divine being, the son of Ra, the living Horus upon earth. His words carried the weight of eternity, his life bound to the fate of the Nile, the harvest, and the people. To build his tomb was to build a vessel for his soul, a stairway for his spirit to rise to the heavens. The workers were told, and many believed, that their sweat and pain served a higher purpose. Imagine the morning assembly at the base of the pyramid. The priests stand in white linen, their heads shaved smooth, their voices chanting prayers to the gods. Incense drifts upward, the sweet smoke curling into the sky. The workers kneel or bow their heads, listening as the priests speak of Ra, the sun god, of Osiris, lord of the afterlife, of Anubis, guardian of tombs. They are told that every block raised is a prayer of stone, every pyramid a hymn that will last forever. This belief gave meaning to their hardship. When a man's shoulders burned from hauling ropes, he told himself it was not in vain. When his hands bled from the grit of limestone, he reminded himself it was for the pharaoh, for the gods, for the eternal order of balance that kept the world from falling into chaos. To labor was to keep the universe steady, to serve not only a king, but the very order of creation. The pyramids themselves were sacred geometry. Their shape pointed to the heavens, their sides aligned with the stars. At night, workers might look up and see the constellation Orion, the belt of stars that Egyptians believed was tied to Osiris. They might whisper to one another that the pyramid was a bridge between earth and sky, a gateway through which the pharaoh's soul would join the gods. To raise a stone was to place a step upon that path. Even death at the worksite was framed as holy. A man crushed by stone or weakened by fever was not merely lost, he was offered, his body resting forever in the shadow of a monument meant to last until the end of time. Excavations of workers' tombs show that they were buried with care, with jars of food and charms for the afterlife. Their labor, though harsh, was not seen as meaningless, but as part of the eternal cycle of death and rebirth that shaped Egyptian belief. For us, it is hard to imagine such devotion. We might see only oppression, hunger, and toil. But to the workers, belief softened the burden. To think that their suffering had purpose, that their lives, though small, contributed to something eternal. This gave them the strength to rise each morning and continue. And so, beneath the burning sun, under the watch of overseers, in the dust of stone and sand, men carried on, not only with their muscles, but with their faith. The pyramid rose, block by block, not just by force of will, but by the quiet conviction that to build for the pharaoh was to build for the gods, to build for eternity itself. The pyramid site was not only a place of labor, it was a place of wounds, sickness, and death. To work in the desert sun, to strain against stone heavier than 10 men. To breathe dust and sleep upon mats of reeds was to live in constant risk. Few escaped unscathed, and many did not live long enough to see the pyramid they built completed. Imagine the workers at the end of a long day. Their bodies are bent, their hands blistered and raw. The skin on their backs is scorched from the sun, their lips cracked and bleeding from thirst. Some cough, their chests rattling with dust that has settled deep in their lungs. Others limp, their ankles twisted, their knees swollen from endless climbing of ramps. Wounds were common. Ropes tore into palms, leaving open cuts. Stones scraped skin raw. A misstep upon the ramp might send a man tumbling, his body broken beneath the very block he was meant to raise. Bones snapped, skulls cracked, and sometimes the desert sand became a grave. Yet even in death, work continued. The block was dragged forward, the chants resumed, the pyramid demanded more. Illness spread quickly in the crowded workers' village. The Nile gave life, but also sickness. Water stored too long grew foul, bringing fever and stomach pains. The bread, gritty with sand, wore down teeth until gums bled, leaving mouths vulnerable to infection. Parasites thrived in unwashed bodies. Fevers ran through the huts, leaving men weak and shivering even in the heat of the desert. Archaeologists have found the bones of these workers, buried not far from the pyramids they raised. Their skeletons tell silent stories, spines curved from heavy lifting, joints worn smooth by endless strain. Ribs cracked from accidents, teeth ground to stubs by coarse bread. Some show signs of healed injuries, proof that medical care existed. Simple splints bound broken bones, honey and herbs treated wounds, prayers and charms soothed the sick. The Egyptians knew the value of their workers. To lose one was costly, and so effort was made to heal them when possible, but not all could be saved. In quiet corners of the desert, cemeteries grew. Workers were laid to rest with modest care. Jars of beer, loaves of bread, amulets carved with prayers. Their graves were small, yet they spoke of respect, a recognition that even the lowliest laborer played a role in eternity. For the living, death was both fear and companion. Every morning, men passed the resting places of their comrades, the silent reminder that tomorrow they too might join them. Yet still they rose. Still they walked to the site. Still they pulled ropes and carried stones, because life was bound to labor, and labor was bound to survival. To us, such risk would be unbearable. To know that each day might end in sickness, in broken bone, in silent burial beneath the desert sands, it would paralyze the will. But for the pyramid worker, death was not an end to fear, but a fact to endure. The gods promised an afterlife. The priests promised that their work would live forever, and so they labored on, even in the shadow of illness and death. The pyramid grew higher, its stones climbing toward the sky, built upon the sweat of the living and the silence of the dead. To look at a pyramid is to see stone, but behind that stone was order. No monument of such scale could rise without structure, without careful planning, without the quiet work of men whose hands held not ropes or chisels, but reeds and tablets. These were the scribes, the keepers of records, the guardians of numbers, the hidden strength of the pharaoh's vision. Imagine a shaded tent at the edge of the worksite. Inside, a scribe sits cross-legged, his linen robes clean despite the dust that clings to all else. In one hand, he holds a slender reed pen, its tip dipped in ink made from soot and water. Before him rests a smooth tablet of clay or a shard of limestone, pale against the earth. His eyes move steadily, his hand flowing across the surface, marking symbols, lines, and curves that capture the life of the workers in silent script. Each man is recorded, his name, his ration, his task. Each group of laborers is assigned to a team, each team given its quota of stones, its portion of bread and beer. The scribes tally everything, the jars of grain, the baskets of onions, the jugs of water. Nothing escapes their ink. To miss a loaf, to miscount a jar, could mean hunger, anger, disorder. And disorder was the one thing the pyramid could not allow. The organization was vast. Workers were divided into gangs, each with its name, the friends of Khufu, the followers of the Strong One. These names bound men to identity, pride, and competition. One gang would race to surpass another, their names scratched upon blocks, proof of their labor carved into the pyramid itself. Beneath these names lay careful control: who hauled stone, who mixed mortar, who shaped blocks, who poured water upon the sand. At the end of each day, the scribes checked the tallies. How many stones were moved? How many men faltered? How many jars of beer remained? A man's existence was measured not by his comfort, but by these marks upon clay: his strength, his worth, his survival, all written in quiet strokes by a hand that never touched a rope, never strained at a sledge. But the scribes did more than count. They ensured order in chaos. When bread ran short, they rationed more carefully. When sickness spread, they marked who was too weak to work and who would take his place. When a man died, they struck his name from the rolls, his ration redistributed to another. To the workers, their overseers shouted commands, but it was the scribes who silently ruled their lives. For us today, it is strange to think that a pyramid rose not only by muscle, but by ink, that in the desert sun, where men sweated and bled, the true power lay in shaded tents, where scribes bent over tablets. Yet without them, chaos would reign, food would vanish, and the pharaoh's dream would crumble before the first stones reached the sky. The workers may have cursed the scribes, resented their clean robes, their soft hands, their lack of scars, but they also knew that without the scribes, there would be no bread, no beer, no work, no life. Numbers were as vital as muscles. Records were as necessary as ropes. And so, in the quiet rhythm of pen upon clay, order was kept. The pyramid rose not only by the sweat of men, but by the lines of numbers that guided them, day after day, year after year, until stone reached sky and the name of the pharaoh was carved forever into eternity. While the workers strained under the sun, dragging stones with blistered hands and bending their backs upon dusty ramps, the world of the elite lay far away, bathed in cool shade, sweet perfumes, and endless abundance. To see both, side by side, the mud brick huts of the laborers and the polished halls of the pharaoh, was to see two different worlds that somehow existed within the same desert. Imagine stepping into the palace of the king. The walls rise tall, coated in smooth plaster, their surfaces painted with vibrant colors: reds, blues, and golds that shine even in dim light. Carved columns stand like trees, their tops shaped as lotus blossoms, their shafts decorated with patterns that tell of gods and kings. The floors are cool stone, sometimes inlaid with tiles of blue faience, glimmering like water. Servants move quietly across these spaces, They carry trays of food-roasted ducks, cuts of beef, fresh fish from the Nile, bread soft and white, unlike the coarse loaves of the workers. Bowls overflow with figs, dates, honey cakes, and pomegranates. Jars of wine, sweetened with herbs, stand beside beer, brewed richer than anything in the villages. For the elite, food is not fuel, it is abundance, flavor, and delight. The pharaoh himself sits upon a throne gilded in gold, his head adorned with the uraeus serpent, with his body draped in fine linen as sheer as mist, his fingers heavy with rings. Around him stand courtiers, officials, and priests, each in clean robes, each perfumed, each carefully speaking words of loyalty. Music drifts in the background, harps, flutes, and soft drums played by musicians, their rhythms slow, soothing, eternal. For the nobles, days are filled not with hauling stone, but with pleasure and ceremony. They attend banquets where dancers sway gracefully, their arms moving like reeds in the wind. They recline upon cushions, drinking wine from alabaster cups, their laughter filling the air. They hunt in the marshes with spears and nets, bringing down birds or fish for sport. They wear jewelry of gold and lapis lazuli, necklaces that gleam like captured sunlight. And yet, even in this luxury, the pyramid looms. For the pharaoh, it is his eternal house. For the priests, it is proof of divine order. For the nobles, it is a reminder of their own place in eternity. For though their tombs would be smaller, they too would rise in stone, filled with treasures and prayers. The workers bent in dust would never share in this luxury, but they built it. Every bite of honey cake, every jar of wine was made possible by their hands, their harvests, their labor. The contrast is stark. In the workers' village, men eat coarse bread that grinds their teeth, onions that sting their mouths, beer that sours in the heat. In the palace, nobles taste figs dipped in honey, lamb roasted with herbs, wine cooled in jars of water from the Nile. In the village, men sleep on mats of reeds, coughing in smoky air. In the palace, nobles rest upon soft bedding, perfumed oils upon their skin, their dreams eased by music and incense. Yet this was the nature of Egypt's order. The workers labored so the elite could flourish. The elite flourished so the monuments could rise. Both worlds depended upon one another, though in very different ways. For us, the inequality seems unbearable. To suffer so much so that others might feast and recline in gold feels unjust. Yet, for the Egyptians, it was the way of things, the balance of Matha, eternal order, the structure of the universe. Everyone had a place. Some hauled stone until their bodies broke. Others ruled, prayed, and lived in splendor. Together they built eternity. And so, beneath the burning sun and the cool shade alike, the pyramid rose its stones laid by calloused hands, its meaning preserved by priests, its glory claimed by kings. To stand before a pyramid is to confront a mystery. Even today, with all our machines, our cranes, and our knowledge, the question lingers. How did they do it? How did men, with nothing but wood, stone, and muscle, raise monuments that touched the sky? The most accepted answer is ramps. Long slopes of packed earth and rubble, stretching for hundreds of meters, rising steadily alongside the growing pyramid. Along these ramps, men dragged blocks upon sledges, ropes straining, bodies bent in unison. Water poured onto the sand, reduced friction, the wet surface helping sledges glide more easily. Teams of men chanted in rhythm, their voices merging with the groan of wood and the scrape of stone. Slowly, painfully, the blocks inched upward, placed one upon another, until the shape of the pyramid emerged. But the ramps themselves remain a puzzle. Were they straight, stretching far across the desert floor? Were they wrapped around the pyramid, spiraling upward like a snake of earth? Or were there many ramps, rising and vanishing as the work advanced? No single answer satisfies, and so the debate continues, the mystery deepening even as evidence is uncovered. Other theories speak of levers and counterweights, wooden beams placed beneath stones, lifted inch by inch, supported by layers of mud brick, until the block reached its place. Some imagine pulleys, though no clear proof has been found. Others suggest sand pit stones lowered carefully into position as sand was removed from beneath them, the earth itself acting as a silent tool. Archaeologists have uncovered traces, fragments of ramps, sledges worn smooth by use, ropes twisted thick from flax and palm fibers. Inscriptions show workers hauling stones, overseers guiding them, gangs named with pride as they left their marks upon blocks. These fragments tell us much, and yet they do not tell us all. For the pyramids are not merely feats of labor, they are feats of coordination and imagination. To build them required not only thousands of hands, but a mind that could see the shape before it rose, that could plan each stone's place, that could command order from chaos. Engineers, architects, priests played their part, but still, the sheer size defies easy explanation. Imagine watching from the desert's edge as the pyramid grows. One year, it is a low platform of stone. Another year, it rises higher, its sides climbing into the sky. Decades pass, and still the work continues. Ramps snake across its sides. Stones crawl upward like ants upon a giant's back. Dust clouds rise in the sun. Slowly, the shape sharpens, until at last, after years beyond counting, a perfect pyramid stands smooth, towering, eternal. For the workers, there was no mystery. They knew only the labor, the ropes, the ramps, the endless climb. But for us today, the question remains. Even with fragments of answers, the whole picture is elusive. The pyramids guard their secrets, their silence as solid as the stones themselves. And perhaps that is part of their power, that even after 4,000 years, they still inspire wonder, that even with all our science, we still look up at their peaks and ask how. The mystery endures, as eternal as the pyramids themselves. The pyramids still stand, their edges softened by time, their stones weathered by desert winds, yet their shapes unmistakable against the horizon. They are the oldest of the world's wonders, and the only ones that remain. But they did not rise from the will of kings alone. They rose from the backs, the hands, the sweat, and the silence of thousands of workers who lived and died in their shadow. For the pharaoh, the pyramid was a stairway to eternity, a tomb to secure his soul among the gods. For the priests, it was the visible proof of divine order, the triumph of Mat over chaos. For the nobles, it was a symbol of power and permanence. But for the workers, it was something else entirely. It was life's burden, its duty, its unending trial. They received no golden sarcophagi, no treasures buried at their side. Their names were not carved into stone, their stories not sung in temples. And yet, without them, there would be no pyramids. Every block still resting in place, every slope still rising against the sky, was laid by hands that blistered, by bodies that bent beneath the weight. Their legacy is silent but eternal, written not in ink or song, but in stone itself. Archaeologists uncover their traces, villages of mud brick, tools worn smooth, bones bearing scars of labor. In these humble remains, we hear their voices faintly, telling us of endurance, of community, of survival. The pyramid is not only the tomb of a king, but the monument of their labor, their resilience, their humanity. And so, the pyramids teach us not only about glory, but about fragility. They remind us that the greatest monuments are built upon the smallest of lives, that eternity is shaped by hands we do not remember, by voices long silent, by people who endured simply because they had no choice. Now, imagine the desert at dusk. The pyramid stands tall, its shadow stretching across the sands. The workers' village grows quiet. The day's dust has settled, the air cooling as the sun sinks low. In the huts, men lie upon reed mats, their bodies weary, their eyes heavy. Children sleep beside them. Women hum soft songs. The faint smell of bread still lingers in the night. The stars appear one by one above the desert, distant, steady, eternal. The Great Pyramid glimmers faintly in their light, its sides catching the last breath of the sun. All is calm. The overseer's shouts are silent. The ropes are slack. The stones are still. For a few hours there is peace. Close your eyes. Hear the soft hush of wind over sand, the distant call of a night bird, the gentle breathing of those who rest after labor. The world is quiet now, the burden of day lifted. The pyramid waits in silence, timeless and unchanging, while the workers drift into dreams, and as they sleep, so may you. Let the desert night surround you. Let the stillness carry you. Let the weight of the day fade away. The pyramids remain, the stars remain, but you may rest. The story of the workers fades into silence. The stones are still. The night is calm. And in that calm, you too may find sleep.